I'm live. 8:20, May 21st, 2024. The other day, I read almost 3 hours from that Patterns book from Rod Serling. And I guess I didn't realize that the working in television section was what he specifically wrote for that book, which was originally published in the 50s. They weren't excerpts from interviews. They were what he had originally written down. And I guess I didn't understand that at the time, but that's okay. But that was fun. I really enjoyed reading that. I really like Rod Serling. I appreciate his perspective from being in the trenches of working in television and how when censorship was pretty tight, how he had to work within that and how much of a competition it must have been for other people, but how exciting it must have been to have been in on the ground floor with that. And that's at a time where people were making rules and breaking them. But I've heard this from different scenarios and different people that's when a lot of great art is produced. It's when like you're trying to hit a deadline or working within constraints and have to write between the lines, or you have to think outside the box. It's not something I think any creative person should be regularly put under, but it pushes you into a different space. And I think for somebody like Rod Serling, it definitely was to his advantage, even if it was inadvertently. He was talking about the wife character in Patterns and how she had to push her husband to be a bit more ruthless because she was depending on him for survival. And when I was watching the original Patterns, I noted that she was a little bit heartless and cruel towards Andy Sloan, the character that is being boosted out, because the very action of him being boosted out gets the main character in, and that's what's needed. And it's very much significant and symbolic of nature in a raw element, where you have to do cruel things in order to survive. Sometimes, in human society, most in humanity, in most times. But I like that he talked about it, and it's something I'm probably going to want to go back and read over in private. Sometimes when I'm reading things aloud, I'm more focused on reading the text correctly than actually taking it in. Sometimes I can do both, and sometimes I can take it in and not necessarily pay too much attention how I'm reading, but it's fun to share it nonetheless. And apparently he was 30 when he broke that kind of invisible ceiling of making it, I guess. And I'm glad he talked about the pros and cons, and I'm glad I have the hiccups right now. He admitted that, yeah, when you're an overnight success, some of it is actually pretty fucking awesome. And it's like, yeah, why wouldn't it be? But then you have the downsides of it, and there's many instances where somebody creates something or exhibits something of themselves that hits a nerve with people, and then you're kind of, if you're not careful, you're defined by it. And even though I only know most of what I know of Rod Serling is Patterns. I also know that he did do The Twilight Zone and Night Gallery and many, many, many other plays. And I can appreciate the fact that Patterns is a great work of art, and at this moment in time, it's probably one of my favorites that he did, but also acknowledge the fact that other things he did, not that they were of equal measure to Patterns, but they're good in their own right. And I think it's important to judge a piece on its own merit and not necessarily up against another piece. People do that naturally because it might make it easier to evaluate it, but sometimes I think in Rod's case, the pieces that followed Patterns didn't have a fair shot at standing on their own because they were in the shadow of Patterns. And if you take something like Requiem for a Heavyweight and completely make it stand alone and don't even think about Patterns and just judge it on its own merit, I think that's an important part of critiquing a piece. That's why I think like award shows are a double-edged sword, because how can you award one thing over the other if they're like 5 different works of art that completely independent of each other and have nothing to do with one another? It's weird. So, in the last 24 hours, I watched a couple films. And I'm going to say, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen these movies, I'm going to talk about the spoilers. But I don't know how many people actually listen to these rambles. I do these when I feel like I have something to say or want to say or want to talk to somebody and don't really have anybody to talk to. So, but spoiler alert just the same. I watched Don't Look Now with Donald Sutherland and Julie Christie, and I finally watched Lady Snowblood. 2 very different movies, but they both had the color scheme of red, and I like that. But I'll go ahead and talk about each one a little bit. Don't Look Now, I first heard of this movie, I think, from a program called 100 Scariest Movie Moments from Bravo. This was a program that aired around Halloween in 2004, I think. Let me look it up, because now I'm curious. 100 Scariest Movie Moments, Bravo. Let's see. Yeah, 2004. And it was a random dub for Bravo. Bravo had been known for like Inside the Actor Studio, and at that time it had Kathy Griffin's My Life on the D List. It actually has like Bravo. What was on Bravo at the time? History. I know there's a way to look at the programming timeline of what was on, but I think it was just before like the Housewives kind of ruined it. Project Runway was big. My Life on the D-List was big. And of course, that's not even featured, but it was. Kathy Griffin kind of owned that channel. But yeah, it was before the Housewives. But Inside the Actor Studio was kind of the big draw of Bravo. And Inside the Actors Studio is a program with James Lipton where he interviewed actors, kind of like it's a little bit of a This Is Your Life kind of take, only it features it in a I don't know, a kind of film appreciation slant to it, but it's very, very James Lipton is pretty pretentious, but it's also charming. It's a little bit more pretentious than it is charming, but it's entirely watchable. And Will Ferrell used to make fun of it on Saturday Night Live, and he was pretty on the money. And it's like one of the few times I can stand Will Ferrell. But James Lipton would end the interview with hang on, I'm getting there. My mind's all over the place. With a questionnaire by Bernard Pivot. Let's see. The questionnaire concept was originated by French television personality Bernard Pivot on his show Apostrophes. After the Proust questionnaire, the 10 questions Lipton asks are: what is your favorite word? What is your least favorite word? What turns you on? What turns you off? What sound or noise do you love? What sound or noise do you hate? What is your favorite curse word? What profession other than your own would you like to attempt? What profession would you not like to do? And if heaven exists, what would you like God say when you arrive at the pearly gates? And then the program usually concludes with a question and Q&A with the students. So it was a fun show. It was a pretentious show, but the actors usually seemed game to go along with it. And that was kind of one of Bravo's biggest draws. I think it kind of kept the lights on at Bravo for a while. Maybe I'm mistaken, but I remember being really into it. But 100 Scariest Movie Moments, let's see. It's a documentary miniseries that aired in late October 2004 on Bravo. And it has all these like critics, actors, crew involved in the making of or just fans of the films. And it has 100 films. It's a list of like 100 films that are favorite horror movies, and there's a quote-unquote scariest movie moment that's featured with each film. With Don't Look Now, let's see, it's listed, and I still enjoy the program today. I've seen it many times, but Don't Look Now is number 22 on this list. All lists don't really matter. It's just because it's one subset of people's opinion on one list. It's not like a finite thing. But they featured Don't Look Now, and like I said, it has Donald Sutherland and Julie Christie on it, and they gave a really good critique of it. The problem is they completely gave away the ending. And it's like, oh, well, thanks. And that was in 2004. The film was made in 1973. So I think the consensus is, if you haven't seen the film in the last 3 decades, that's your own damn fault, regardless of when you were born and when your interest in it is. And I can see that. It didn't ruin the film for me. It did ruin the ending for me because I hadn't seen the film and I didn't know they were going to show a spoiler of the ending. But John Landis, they have all these serious critiques, and John Landis kind of pops the balloon on it. But Don't Look Now, let's see, was a story. It's an adaptation by Nicholas Roeg from the 1971 short story by Daphne du Maurier called Not After Midnight. Or wait, shit. I'm reading her page. Oh, Not After Midnight and Other Stories. Okay, but no, Don't Look Now. John and his grief-stricken wife Laura take a holiday in Venice following the death of their daughter Christine. from meningitis. That's in the short story. In the film, the daughter drowns. So I should probably be reading from the film analysis. John Baxter and his grief-stricken wife travel to Venice, where John has accepted a commission from a bishop to restore an ancient church. Laura encounters two elderly sisters, Heather and Wendy, at a restaurant where she and John are dining. Heather claims to be psychic, and despite being blind, informs Laura she is able to see the Baxters' deceased daughter. Shaken, Laura returns to her table, then faints. Laura is then taken to the hospital, where she later tells John what Heather told her. John is skeptical but pleasantly surprised by the positive change in Laura's demeanor. That afternoon, after returning from the hospital, John and Laura have passionate sex. Afterwards, they go out to dinner and en route get lost and briefly become separated. John catches a glimpse of a small figure wearing a red coat similar to the one Christine was wearing when she died. The next day, Laura meets with Heather and Wendy, who hold a seance to try to contact Christine, the daughter. When she returns to the hotel, Laura informs John that Christine said he is in danger and must leave Venice. John argues with Laura, but that night they receive a telephone call informing them that their son has been injured in an accident at boarding school. Laura departs for England while John stays on to complete the restoration. Shortly afterward, John is nearly killed in an accident at the church when the scaffold he is standing on collapses, and he interprets this as the danger foretold by the sisters. Let's see. Later that day, assuming that Laura is in England, John is shocked when he spots her on a passing boat in a funeral cortege, accompanied by the sisters. Concerned about his wife's mental state and with reports of a serial killer at large in Venice, John reports Laura's seeming disappearance to the police. The inspector investigating the killings is suspicious of John and has him followed. After conducting a futile search for Laura and the sisters, during which he again sees the childlike figure in the red coat, John contacts his son's school to inquire about his condition, only to discover that Laura is actually there. After speaking to her to confirm she really is in England, a bewildered John returns to the police station to inform the police that he has found his wife. In the meantime, the police have brought Heather in for questioning, and an apologetic John offers to escort her back to the hotel. Let's see. The spoiler alert. Shortly after returning to the hotel, Heather slips into a trance. John quickly leaves. Upon coming out of the trance, Heather pleads with her sister to go after John, sensing that something terrible is about to happen. But Wendy is unable to catch up with him. Meanwhile, John catches another glimpse of the mysterious figure in red and this time pursues it. He corners the figure in a deserted palazzo and approaches, believing it to be a child. That figure turns to face him, revealing a hideous female dwarf. When John freezes in shock, the dwarf pulls out a meat cleaver and cuts his throat. Dying, John realizes too late that the strange sightings he experienced were premonitions of his own murder and funeral. So, I've seen this film in its entirety twice. And I still don't know how I feel about it. I like it. I like it enough that I would watch it a third time because it's so stylistically phenomenal. Nicholas Roeg was a cinematographer, I think, before he turned to directing. And the way he stages a lot of his shots are very stylish. I was gonna say stylistic, but very intentional. Like, it's his use of color and intent and focus and framing is very deliberate and very precise. There's no non-thought behind every shot in this film. And I think That's a big reason why it's so memorable. The story itself is compelling, but to me, it's kind of taking a back seat to the style of the film. Hang on. Mhm. And maybe not a back seat, but a sidecar. Because I think the story is like just not as strong as this style, but both are strong, so it's okay for me. Hmm. Okay, analysis, the themes. Don't Look Now is an occult-themed thriller in which the conventions of the Gothic ghost story serve to explore the minds of a grief-stricken couple. Because in the film you have that kind of all familiar dynamic where you have a believer and you have a skeptic, and that kind of like that kind of strike in between the couple serves to separate them, not unite them. And they are, even though they have big differences, they are pretty united as a couple, and you're rooting for them to stay together to get through this process of grieving their kid, even though they're taking different approaches to it. And their different approaches are testing each other's patience with it, specifically John. Um, The film's director, Nicholas Roeg, was intrigued by the idea of making grief into the sole thrust of the film, noting that grief can separate people, even the closest, healthiest relationship can come undone through grief. Right. And I was thinking that even though they're fighting and it's tearing them apart, they're fighting to like come to an understanding of it, and they're fighting to keep it together. They're compromising, even if they're not always making the right choices. They're trying to not come apart, I think. The presence of And they're both doing it. So they're, a pretty strong good couple. The presence of Christine, the Baxters' deceased daughter, weighs heavily on the mood of the film, as she and the nature of her death are constantly recalled through the film's imagery. There are regular flashbacks to Christine playing in her red coat, as well as sightings of the mysterious childlike figure also wearing a red coat, which bears a likeness to her. The constant association of water with death is maintained via a serial killer subplot, which sees the victims periodically dragged from the canals. There's also a poignant moment when John fishes a child's doll out of a canal, just as he did with his daughter's body at the beginning of the film. The associative use of recurring motifs combined with unorthodox editing techniques foreshadows key events in the film. In Daphne du Maurier's novella, it is Laura that wears a red coat, but in the film, the color is used to establish an association between Christine and the elusive figure that John keeps catching glimpses of. The plot of the film is preoccupied with misinterpretation and mistaken identity. When John sees Laura on a barge with the sisters, he fails to realize it is a premonition and believes Laura is in Venice with him. John himself is mistaken for a peeping Tom, follows Laura to the seance, and ultimately he mistakes the mysterious red-coated figure for a child. So that you have doppelganger. Uh, Communication is a theme that runs through most of Nicholas Roeg's work and figures heavily in Don't Look Now. This is best exemplified by the blind psychic woman, Heather, who communicates with the dead, but it is presented in other ways. The language barriers are purposefully enhanced by the decision not to include subtitles translating the Italian dialogue into English, so the viewer experiences the same confusion as John. Women are presented as better at communicating than men, besides the clairvoyant being female. It is Laura who stays in regular contact with their son Johnny. When the Baxters receive a phone call informing them of Johnny's accident at boarding school. So it's a complex movie. I watched it not, 24 hours ago, and it's still like hitting me rather hard, I guess. Let's see. Yeah, and this film has a pretty graphic sex scene. There's a line in the movie where one of the sisters says, or so one of the characters says, yeah, the death of a child is bad, but you can always make more. And it's just like, Jesus, that's really awful. But I think the sex scene was to illustrate the fact that they're connected as a couple, and they're expressing that connection physically, literally, and they're hanging on to each other because they have to get through this, or else they'll fall apart. I think both as a couple and as individuals. And maybe that's a wrong interpretation of it, but even though they have disagreements, they come together pretty strong. It's ultimately devastating that John ends up murdered. And I do think what's her character's name? Julie Christie's character's name. Laura is sad. She's not like outright upset at the funeral. She tried to warn you that something would happen. You didn't listen. You dismissed her. You had other warnings, and you dismissed them, and you ended up succumbing to other people's premonitions. And this happened a lot in the 70s. Another horror movie, The Omen, is so frustrating to watch because I feel like Gregory Peck gets like 50 chances to fucking like heed multiple people's warnings, and he just keeps blatantly ignoring them until it's too late. And it's like, dude, you had so many fucking chances to, set things right, and you didn't. And The Omen, it's a little dated now, and it has elements of the film that don't work for it. And that one element is certainly irritating, but it's also in line with that of the skeptic, and how if there's a character that's a skeptic, a lot of the piece has to be focused on proving to the skeptic that what's happening is real. And what you're viewing as an audience are characters who are trying to make sense of a situation that is real, in a sense that other characters could believe it's unbelievable. And maybe even as a viewer, even if you're watching it unfold and you can actually see it happening, it doesn't seem real because it's so fantastical. There's never been another story in which I've read or seen where there's a quote-unquote dwarf serial killer dressed in a red Macintosh raincoat. And I also think that's an interesting part of this story. You have elements that you don't see in other films. Certainly you see Venice in other films. You see raincoats in other films. You see serial killers. You see art restorationists. You see graphic sex. You see this, that, and the other. But you don't. I haven't seen all these elements together in this one film, and I think it works really, really, really well. I just, I'm not sure what to take away from it. I don't, and not, and there doesn't necessarily have to be anything to take away from it. You just watch it and feel how you feel, and then move on. But it's just something about it. I'm just not sure. It's an exploration of the psychology of grief and the effect of death, and the effect the death of a child can have in a relationship. So, I never did read the Daphne du Maurier short story. I've seen it described as a short story, and I've seen it described as a novella. I always forget what the cutoff is. Um, yeah, and I don't know that there's like any lessons to be learned. And if there is, it's completely going over my head. Like even the title "Don't Look Now" could be construed as Donald Sutherland's character is can't be bothered and is not looking at what is in front of him, what other people are telling him. He's the one that's in denial about his daughter's death. He does say she's dead, but it doesn't mean that her death doesn't have a present impact on his life and the lives surrounding him and that of himself in a couple. But if you don't look now, you might pay for it. I don't know. I'm sure there's a better understanding of what the film's or the short story or novella, its title means. Um, oh yeah, it doesn't really say why the title is what it is. Maybe it's just good. Maybe it's just a good title. Don't Look Now. Maybe if I read it, I'll have an epiphany as to what the more literal sense is, and maybe there isn't a literal sense. Regardless, it's a really good movie. Julie Christie and Donald Sutherland are both um, immortalized in their youth and beauty. They're both beautiful people. Donald, they both have striking features, and I think they worked really well together. And it's enjoyable to watch. It's eerie to watch and unsettling to watch, but it's interesting to watch characters navigating a scenario like this, and especially in Venice, where Venice is a labyrinth. It's a labyrinth in the fact of the waterways and how you have to move throughout the city, and then when you actually get off the water, it's a labyrinth in between the buildings. So it's a perfect setting for people who are struggling to find the end of whatever figurative maze they're going through. And it really adds to the film. I think that's about all I have to say about it. I'll probably, if I get my hands on it again, I'll probably watch it again on down the line. But there's a lot of I always say that's all I have to say, and then I say more. There's a lot of people in the film. There's like a focus on the people like giving Donald Sutherland like second glances and honing in on things that are increasing the paranoia of the piece, and it heightens the tension of the story, because I think we're supposed to be viewing it from John's point of view. And also there's a concept of the believer's right. Like, and if the believer is right, what else are you wrong about? And if the believer was right, was it just coincidence or was it real? And I think that's also part of what John's character was doing. John was trying to figure out if what she was saying was real, or if what she was inferring from the psychics were real. And I'm glad they included a scene where he's just kind of like, she's prattling on and on about what the psychics tell her, and he's like, Laura, this is bullshit. They're scamming you, and they're wasting your time, and they're using our dead kid as, a selling point to get you to buy their story. Like, just stop. And it does make her character second guess herself. He's not gaslighting her. He's simply saying, these women are working you, and it's like, just stop. And he's irritated with her, but I think he also understands she's trying to process her grief in a way that she might not be able to understand. However, she might inadvertently be onto something that's going to happen to them, or either of them in the future, by being open. So it's one to sit on, it's one to think about, it's one to read about. It's definitely one to watch more than once, if not just for the story, for the style. And the style is amazing. Nicholas Roeg, let's see, what else did he do? I want to see his filmography. Let's see. Judith, performance, Walkabout, Glastonbury Fair, Don't Look Now, The Man Who Fell to Earth, Bad Timing, Eureka, Insignificance, Castaway, Aria, Track 29, The Witches, Cold Heaven, Two Deaths, Puffball. Wow. He worked. Judith, who's in Judith? Sophia Loren. There's so many movies I haven't watched. And the ones I have watched, I've seen more than once. And that's okay. Good director. He died in November 2018. All right. Moving on. I also saw a movie, Lady Snowblood. I had heard of this movie through Uma Thurman talking about it as inspiration for Kill Bill. I thought she was talking about her inspiration as a character for The Bride. And I think she was, but she was also talking about inspirations for the films as a whole. And Lady Snowblood, I don't know where the line is between inspiration and straight ripoff, but I can now see why people go after Quentin really hard about kind of just biting other people's movies. It's not even biting the style. It's, there are shot for shots that are just taken from other movies. And I guess you can do that if you funnel it through a different means, but he really ripped off a lot of shots and a lot of the style from this film. This film is about, let's see, it's based on the manga series of the same name, and it's about Yuki, a woman who seeks vengeance upon 3 of the people who raped her mother and killed her half-brother. The film's narrative is told out of chronological order, jumping between the present and past events. Alongside Kaji, the film's cast includes a bunch of names I don't want to butcher, I don't want to disrespect. So it's a vengeance film. 1973, a Japanese Jidaigeki film, period drama. This is also a film that has a heavy style, and red is featured very heavily because of blood. Because of fabric, because of flag colors, because of all different. It's in the name, blood, and red is associated with violence. But it's also a really beautiful color and very cinematic. Um, yeah. In 1874, a woman named Sayo gives birth to a baby girl in a woman's prison. Naming the child Yuki from the snow outside, Sayo confides to her inmates how she was brutally raped by 3 of the 4 criminals who murdered her husband and son a year ago. While she managed to stab her captor to death, she was arrested and imprisoned for life. She then seduced many prison guards in order to conceive Yuki. Due to difficulties during the birth, she dies shortly after. Her final words are for the child to be raised to carry out the vengeance against the 3 remaining tormentors. In Meiji 15th, 1882, Yuki undergoes brutal training in sword fighting under the priest Dokai to become her mother's wrath incarnate. So, I'm going to continue to watch this, but it's a really sad film because the mom brings this kid into the world to essentially do her bidding because she knows she can't, but she's like damning this child to a life not of her own. And it's really sad. And spoiler alert, that's probably why one of the last frames of the movie is her like clutching the snow and like wailing, because it's like, although she's accomplished her mission, it was still at the behest of others' actions that it existed in the first place, and therefore why she exists in the first place. Her whole identity is finishing her mother's unfinished business. So, yeah. Yuki, now 20, and an assassin going by the name Shorayuki Hime, kills a group of men and their leader Shibayama. She visits a poor village looking for a man called Matsumon, the leader of an underground organization of street beggars, and asks him to find her mother's surviving tormentors in return for having killed Shibayama for him. Matsumon's intel leads her to Takemura Banzo, an alcoholic with gambling debts whose daughter Kobu works as a prostitute to support him. Yuki tells him that he learns that the last of her mother's rapists, Sukamoto Gishiro, has suspiciously died in a shipwreck 3 years prior when she first attempted to find him. Yuki is followed by a reporter named Ashio, who learned of her story from Dokai, who persuaded him to publish it as a means to draw out one of Sayo's tormentors, Okano. Okano sends men to kidnap Ashio for Yuki's location, but Ashio refuses to tell. Yuki enters Okano's estate and kills several of his men. I think he meant her men. Yuki and Ashio find Okano's dying body hanging in a room. Yuki slices her in half. Ashio tells her that Gishiro is his father and had faked his death when he learned of Yuki's mission. She finds Gishiro at a masquerade ball and kills a man acting as his decoy. The real Gishiro shoots Ashio. Ashio stops him from shooting Yuki, and she stabs through Ashio into Gishiro. She then cuts Gishiro's throat as he shoots her. He falls over a railing and onto the ground floor full of guests. Yuki, wounded, is stabbed by a waiting Kobu, who has been pursuing Yuki all this while in her own quest to avenge her father's murder. Yuki collapses in the snow, apparently dead. The following morning, however, she opens her eyes. This movie was really good. It was really over the top in a way that I don't know if that was drawn from the manga that it originated from. I'm gonna guess that it was. Because I don't know if the drawings. I don't know the drawings. I can assume you can be as violent as you want in a drawing, and it's not as taxing as filming violence for a film. But it's really over the top, and every sword slice into a person, you have a person gushing and geysering out this blood fountain, which, to be fair, may occur in a certain way if you hit a certain artery. But it's really over the top in acting and style and action and direction. But that's another part of a draw like this, because it's an action movie. It's a even though it's a period drama, it's an action movie, and it's an avenging story. So you don't want to have a film like this be dull, but in the reverse, you go the other way, you go really hard. And it works. And I can see why Quentin really not just bit the style, but just kind of took it. And you can tell in Kill Bill parts of this film that he just out and out took and integrated it into his own version of an avenging story. I don't even know how to say it. I do like Kill Bill, and I'm sure Quentin and Uma were sitting around one night kind of talking about the films like this, films like Lady Snowblood, and let's see, another Bruce Lee, Fists of Fury, I think. And he just took bits and pieces from all these movies and combined them into his own. Because Tarantino conceived Kill Bill as an homage to the 1973 film Lady Snowblood, grindhouse cinema, martial arts films, samurai cinema, blaxploitation, and spaghetti westerns. It features an anime sequence by Production IG Volume 1. So, and it has similar scenes, you and I have unfinished business, similar dialogue too, unfinished business, and similar concepts and similar shots. So I hope that Quentin talked with, I don't think he did because he died, Toshiya Fujita, about this. I know he talked to the film's lead actress, Meiko Kaji, and I know he acknowledges, it being a quote-unquote inspiration, but a lot of it is a straight rip-off of the movie, and I wonder how the people involved in Lady Snowblood feel about this crazy American director just completely stealing a lot of their concepts. So, but he did it anyway, and it was a massive success. So, take that as you will. Um, let's see. Ooh, ooh. Okuda, a producer from the independent studio Tokyo Aiga, wanted to make a film starring actress and singer Meiko Kaji, known at the time for her role in Toei's successful female prisoner Scorpion series. He felt that a film adaptation of Lady Snowblood manga would be ideal for such a project, and contracted Norio Osada to write the script and Fujita to direct. Although the two men were friends, they were aware of their differing creative approaches. It was also Osada's first manga adaptation and Fujita's first action-heavy film. According to Osada, Fujita usually preferred a less tight script so he could shape his own films, but Osada presented his first draft to his colleague Kinji Fukusaku, who told Fujita that he would make the film if Fujita was not willing. The director immediately relented. Osada wrote the film with the intention that it would serve as a standalone adaptation of the manga rather than a launching point for a series. So, it's really good. And there were parts of it where I was that annoying audience member, like, be careful or look behind you or it's a trap. And I was invested. And, but ultimately, I felt really sad for the character. And I'm sure that since it was derived from a manga, seeing a probably seeing something like a film in already kind of storyboard form, a la a comic. If I have manga right, I don't really know much about manga. It would be easier to see it as a film because you're seeing it in a frame by frame reference. And I can see why that would be incredibly attractive and appealing to people that are looking for a creative endeavor. So I don't know how popular the manga was. Let's see. Um, Tom Rosen from Mega Life considers Lady Snowblood another cold-blooded revenge drama from the author of Lone Wolf and says he enjoyed the mix of Western modernization and Japanese traditionalism. W.E. Wallow from blogcritics.org finds the English translation weak compared to that of The Lone Wolf and Cub, but recommends it to any fans of the latter series. Similar to Tim Rosen, he praises the prevalent East-West dichotomy. So I don't know how it performed among comic book readers, but it's popular enough that we're still talking about it half a century later, eh? Oh, or almost half a century later. So it was serialized in Shueisha's weekly Playboy magazine from February 1972 to March 1973. A female assassin who seeks vengeance against the bandits who murdered her stepfather and older half-brother and raped her mother. So interesting. Interesting and sad. I don't think I have anything more of substance to say about it. as I only just watched it. I really liked the shot of the umbrella, not just wafting, but intentionally moving from one space to the other in one of the shots. It was like a signal, and I've never seen anything like that in a movie. I love watching movies where I've never seen anything I've seen in any other movie before, and I'd never seen that in another movie before. And I liked the color, and I liked the characters, and I liked the movement of it, and I liked the motivations. So I think I liked it. I liked it. I didn't like how blatantly Quentin ripped it off, and I don't know how if you can call something an homage if it's like straight ripping, but whatever. I enjoyed it. It's a good movie. It's a sad movie though. I don't know that I can watch it again, or I'm going to watch it again. But I enjoyed it. But that's about all I wanted to blather on about today. Um, my next essay from Gore Vidal is an essay about Ulysses S. Grant and the 18th president of the United States. And we already talked about his failings, and I don't know if he's going to talk about his involvement in the Mexican-American War, but I'll be interested to see what he does. I could read it right now, but I'm not really in the mood right now. I want to focus on other stuff. But Gore was always talking about how not that he regretted not doing it, but if there's one thing he could have written about, it's the time period of the Mexican-American War and its influence on shaping us as a nation. So, but yeah, I think that's all I want to talk about. I enjoyed reading Rod Serling. I enjoyed watching Don't Look Now again, and seeing Julie Christie's and Donald Sutherland's beautiful faces. I enjoyed Lady Snowblood. Don't Look Now and Lady Snowblood, very artistic, very hyper stylized, beautifully shot films. I do recommend them. And from listening to what's going on outside, it feels like we're on the brink of a tornado that's not going to happen, which is good. But anyway, yeah, that's all I have to say. Anybody watching, thanks for listening. Anybody that's into my channel, thanks for stopping by. And I think that's it. Until next time. All right. Love you. See ya.